Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So ready to start?
I think we can start anytime, Venerable.
So good morning, Singapore. And hello to all of you, wherever you are. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama is teaching soon. So we'll stop early. I think it's now 10 o'clock where you are. We'll stop about 11 o'clock or 10 past 11 at the latest. So you have time to have a break. And then His Holiness starts teaching at 11:30 Singapore time. Is that right? I think. Okay. And we're watching the teachings here too. So that gives me a break. Okay. So we are going through the text of the 7-point mind training. And so far we've covered the first 4 points, and tonight we'll start looking at the 5th point. So let's begin with some meditation to calm down our minds and get our minds into a positive state, an altruistic state, have an altruistic motivation for being here, participating in this session. So try to sit comfortably. Good if you can keep your back straight. But at the same time, let your shoulders relax. In fact, let all the muscles in the body relax, except the ones you need to keep your back upright. So let those work. But the point is to have a straight back, but at the same time, as relaxed as possible, not tense and tight. So if you do notice any tension, any tightness anywhere in your body, see if you can release it, relax that area. Sometimes just putting your awareness, your attention at that place and just telling yourself to relax, telling that place to relax, that can be enough to let go of the tension. And let your breathing be natural. Let the flow of breath in and out of your body be natural. In other words, don't try to control your breathing. Just let your body breathe as it normally does. And let your attention rest on the breath, meaning be aware of the breath as it's flowing in and as it's flowing out. Try to keep up this awareness for each breath, each inhalation, each exhalation of the breath, in and out, one breath after another. And if other thoughts arise in your mind, or if you hear sounds or anything else that might distract you from the breath, as soon as you've noticed that that's happened, let go of the other thought or the memory, the sound, whatever it is, whatever distracts you other than the breath. Let go of that other thing and bring your awareness back to your breathing. With each breath, each inhalation, each exhalation, try to become more and more relaxed. There may be things you are worried about or upset about or things you have to take care of later, but you can put those aside for now and take them up again later. Just decide that for now you'll be right here in the present, paying attention to your breath, paying attention to the meditation that we're doing, what we're doing in this session. Put everything else aside for now. So, observing our breath in this way puts our mind into a neutral state. It's neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. So before you open your eyes and we start the talk, let's see if we can put our mind into a virtuous state, have a virtuous intention or motivation for participating in this talk, in this session. So what we are looking at here is the topic of mind training, or Lo-jong, which is basically about how to develop bodhicitta, the aspiration to become a Buddha, to help all living beings. There's many different components to that, such as having great compassion for all living beings, wishing them to be free of suffering, wishing to help them be free of suffering. Also loving kindness, wishing all beings to be happy, and taking on the responsibility oneself to do whatever it takes so that they are happy. And learning to overcome the hindrances in our mind to cultivate these positive qualities. So one of the main hindrances is self-centeredness or selfishness, an attitude that says, I am more important than others. I am important, more important than anybody else. And then, of course, the other afflictive emotions like anger, attachment, pride, jealousy, and so on. So there's lots of different aspects to this topic or this subject of mind training, Lo-jong. But basically, it's all about how to transform our minds so that we are more concerned about others and do more things that will benefit others and not do things that will harm others. and then orient everything we do to attaining enlightenment, Buddhahood, to help all living beings. So that's actually the best motivation we can have for learning about this topic of Lo-jong mind training. So if you're comfortable with that idea, then bring that into your mind. Think that you're here listening to this talk so that you can engage in these practices for the purpose of reaching enlightenment, becoming a Buddha, and then being able to help all other sentient beings to reach enlightenment as well. But if any of you are not so familiar with the idea of bodhicitta and maybe think it's quite hard to think that way, to generate that attitude, try at least to feel the wish to help others as much as you can in your life and not harm them. And you can make that your motivation. Think that you're here to learn more about how you can be more helpful to others and to the world, and how you can avoid doing harmful things to others and to the world. So just do the best you can to have some kind of altruistic, other-centered motivation as your reason for being here and listening to this talk. Okay, so you can relax now. Sit comfortably if you need to. Change your position. Open your eyes. So anyone who may have come in late, I'm going to stop early tonight so that we all have a chance to watch the teachings by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which will be starting 11:30 Singapore time. So tonight's session will be a bit shorter. So last session we looked at the fourth of the 7 points in the 7-point mind training, which is the 5 powers. These are 5 areas of practice that we engage in during our life, and then having become familiar with them while we're alive, we can also practice them at the time of death. And if we can practice these, even if we can't practice all of them, but even practice some of them at the time of death, will be very beneficial for us for what comes after death, for our next life, being able to have a fortunate rebirth or go to Amitabha's Pure Land or someplace where we can continue to learn and practice the Dharma, continue on the path to enlightenment. So now, tonight we'll start looking at the next point of the text, which is point number 5, and it's called the measure of having trained the mind. So what this means is having learned about mind training and practiced these teachings, put them into practice, how do we know if we are progressing, if our practice is going well, going in the right direction, actually helping us change our mind in the way we would like to? So that's what this point is all about. So the first line in this point is integrate all the teachings into one thought. Integrate all the teachings into one thought. So the commentary, Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun, says, since all the Buddha's teachings and the commentaries to them were meant to subdue the misconception of self, and since that is the conception that is to be eradicated or exhausted, we should examine whether the activities of our body, speech, and mind favor and encourage the misconception of self or oppose it. So here he's talking about the misconception of self, and this refers to a mistaken conception that we have within us, within our minds, that believes in an I, a self, an I, a me, that is existing on its own, by itself, from its own side. It's sometimes called the inherently existing self, inherently existing I. And another term for that, which might be more understandable, is independently existing, meaning that it exists on its own without depending on anything else for its existence. So this may sound kind of complicated and technical, but basically what it means is we have this sense of an I inside of us somewhere. It's kind of vague. We don't really know where it is and how it exists, but it just feels like it's there, especially when we get emotional, when we get upset, we get angry, we feel hurt, we feel frightened or excited, some wonderful thing is happening, or we have, expectations, anticipations about things that we hope will happen, and then we get really, really excited. So when we have those kinds of emotions, there's a sense of an I, a real I, who's somehow behind that emotion or underneath that emotion, experiencing that emotion. There's a sense of a real I who is angry, a real I who is excited, a real I who is frightened. And normally we never question this I. It just feels like it's there and it feels like it's real. And so we just believe in that, go along with it, believe there is this real I. And even at times when we're not having strong emotions, there's still a sense of an I here. I am here and I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I think this and I feel that and I'm going here and so on and so forth. So probably most people never, question, what is the I? What exactly is the I? They just automatically go along with it and believe in it. Well, the Buddha said we need to investigate this I and see what it is and if it exists the way we think it does or not. Don't just believe in it blindly, but investigate it. So this is a big topic, and actually it's coming later in the text. It's towards the beginning of the text. Point number 2 of the text was the development of bodhicitta, cultivating bodhicitta. And it was said there that there were 2 kinds of bodhicitta, conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. Conventional bodhicitta is what we normally think of as bodhicitta, the wish to become enlightened, to help all living beings. Ultimate bodhicitta, on the other hand, is actually the wisdom realizing emptiness in the mind of a bodhisattva. And in some versions of the text, ultimate bodhicitta actually comes right at the beginning. But this version of the text has put it at the end because it's a difficult topic. And it's quite important that we have the right motivation for engaging in learning about ultimate bodhicitta, or the wisdom realizing emptiness, to make sure that it's part of our bodhisattva attitude, our bodhisattva practice, to reach enlightenment, to help all living beings. So by looking first at relative bodhicitta and how to train our mind to be more compassionate, more loving, more caring towards others, then there's greater chance that when we learn about emptiness, it will be part of that. It will be in that context, and we'll use it in the right way. So anyway, we will have a look at this topic later, towards the end of our course. But basically, it's really an important topic. And as it says here, everything that the Buddha taught is for the purpose of overcoming the wrong conception, the misconception about our I, believing that we exist in a mistaken way, in a way that we actually don't. So this is what we call emptiness. It's another term is selflessness. And this is something everybody has. Everybody has this basic misconception about the self. Even babies, even animals, we're born with it. We carry it with us from past lives. It isn't something we learned from our parents or from our teachers in school. We were born with it. So even a newborn baby, just first day in the world, already has this sense of an I, a sense of a real I. And then having this sense of a real, independently existing I, which in fact doesn't exist, it's like a false idea, then this is the basis for all of our afflictive emotions. It's the basis for self-centeredness, which we talked about quite a bit in the last few weeks, this attitude of me first. I am the most important person of all. I'm the center of the universe, more important than everybody else. And then, so much of our actions and decisions are based on that. It's all about me, what's good for me, what's going to help me, what's going to make me happy. And so that's kind of a very major attitude in our mind. And it's also a main obstacle to being able to progress on the path to enlightenment, something we have to overcome. And then in addition to that, or emerging from that, are other afflictive emotions, such as anger or hatred towards anybody who doesn't treat us the way we want to be treated, or the way we think we should be treated, or who just, we don't like the way they look, we don't like the way they do things, and so on. So then towards those kind of people, we develop anger, hatred, and maybe even become violent, aggressive. And then there's other people who please us. They do what we want them to do. They make us feel good, make us feel happy, give us things that make us feel good. And towards those people, we generate attachment. We want them to be close to us. We want to be close to them. We want to make them part of our world, part of our life. And we have a lot of clinging, grasping towards them. And not just people, but things as well. Things we see, sounds we hear, other kinds of objects we encounter, things that happen in the world. So almost all day long, we are responding with liking this or disliking that, feeling attraction and attachment to this, aversion, hatred towards that. And at the base of these emotions is this attitude of I, this grasping at an I, a sense of a real I, a real me. So that's why everything that the Buddha taught is for the purpose of freeing us from this misconception, because it's the source of all our suffering, source of all our problems, the source of all the problems in the world, in fact, all the wars, all the conflicts between people, all the harm that people do to one another, lying, cheating, and so on. So all of these problems, if we trace the root, we can get back to this basic conception of an I and self-importance, self-centeredness, and then all these other afflictive emotions that come out of that. So anyway, basically what this point is about, this line that says integrate all the teachings into one thought, is that if we are engaging in Lo-jong, mind training practice, then ideally our practice should oppose the misconception of self, belief in grasping at a real, inherently existing self or I. So our practice should go against that rather than support it. So this is something we have to check. Is my practice making my ego bigger? Am I getting a bigger ego? Am I getting more self-centered by practicing? If so, we're doing something wrong. That's not how it should be. So our practice should be such that our ego, our sense of a strong, big I, big fat I, big fat me, big fat ego, that should be decreasing. Our self-centeredness should be decreasing. Our anger, our attachment, our jealousy and pride, all these afflictive emotions should be decreasing rather than increasing. So this is something we need to check for ourselves. And then the next line says, primary importance should be given to the two witnesses. So the two witnesses are oneself and others, okay? So witness here means, someone who's watching oneself and checking to see if we're behaving properly or not. Okay, so we are one witness. We can look at ourselves, look at our own mind, look at our actions, our behavior, and check to see if we are living in accordance with the teachings, if we're living in accordance with the Dharma or with mind training specifically. But there's also others. So other people are also a witness to us. So the people you spend time with, your family, your friends, especially your Dharma friends, okay? So they can also be a witness to our development or lack of development. Okay, so it might happen sometimes that people will point out to you, and this does happen. Wow, you're getting really much more patient than you used to be. You're not getting as angry as you used to be. Or you're much more kind. You're much more generous than you used to be. Much easier to be around. So you might hear those kind of comments from, your family, your friends, your colleagues at work, and so on. So they're pointing out that they can see some improvement in the way that you are, the way that you're behaving. On the other hand, they might also point out things that aren't so positive, like you're really getting angry a lot these days. What's going on with you? You're going to all these Buddhist teachings, studying all these Buddhist books and texts, and going to retreats, but you're still getting so angry, and you're behaving so selfishly. So what's going on? Okay, so sometimes other people can notice things about us and point things out to us. So they can be a witness to whether our practice is going well or getting worse. Yeah, but it's the main witness is oneself, because for various reasons. One reason is only we can see our own mind. Other people cannot see our mind. They cannot see our thoughts and our feelings, what's really going on inside of us. And we can sometimes be deceitful, like we might really feel aversion for somebody, dislike somebody, but we kind of hide that and we put on a smile and we try to be nice and friendly and act as if we like that person. Okay, so then we can pretend to be loving and kind and caring and so on. And other people might be deceived by that. They might think, well, you treat that other person so well, even though they were so nasty to you, or something like that. But if we look at our inside, at our own mind, and we notice that we're actually behaving pretentiously, we're pretending, and it's not genuine, Maybe we want that person to like us, or we want that person to not yell at us, to not get mad at us. So our actions are not genuinely warm and friendly and caring, but there's still some self-centeredness there. There's, what's in it for me? What's benefiting me there? So other people probably won't notice that because they can't see our mind, but we can. So we are a much more reliable witness as to what's really going on in our mind, especially, if our behavior is sincere or not. So there are these two witnesses, and the main one of the two witnesses is oneself. So we should rely on our own ability to pay attention to our mind, especially with mindfulness. Have mindfulness and introspection. Look at our mind and try to be very, very honest, very, not pretentious to ourselves, not deceiving to ourselves, but honest about what's really going on in our mind. But it's also helpful to listen to what other people say. They can sometimes notice things that we don't notice about ourselves. For example, one time a woman told me that, she was a Buddhist. She was studying and meditating, practicing, trying to practice. And one day she was having an argument with her husband. And at a certain point, he said to her, "You're really angry." And that took her by surprise because she hadn't realized that she was angry. I think she probably just thought she was trying to make a point, or she was trying to defend her point of view or whatever, but wasn't aware that she was actually angry until he said that. And so then it kind of made her stop and check, and she realized it was true. She was angry. And so then she stopped arguing and, went to work on her anger, which is really good because other people, if somebody said that, they might get defensive and say, "I'm not angry." Or they might even blame the other person. "You're just projecting. You're the one who's angry and you're just projecting it on me." And so they might just get more angry, more argumentative. So it was quite good for her that she accepted what her husband said and then realized she had to work on her anger. Okay, so we need to rely on the witnesses, others and ourselves. But even, when other people do say things about us, they can also get it wrong. Some people might accuse us of something or criticize us for something, which may not be true. So it's good to check people's words, check to see if they're true or not. For example, one of my teachers once gave some really, really helpful advice. He said that when someone criticizes us, there's really no reason to be upset about the criticism. And of course we do get upset. I get upset. We don't like hearing criticism. But what he said was really logical, really made sense. He said, if somebody criticizes you, stop and look at the criticism, what it is they are saying, and ask yourself if it's true or not. Sometimes it might be true, like in the case of that woman. Her husband said, "You're angry," and she checked and realized, yeah, it's true, I am angry. So then he's just pointing out something that's true. Okay, so sometimes people are just pointing out something that's true, and we should accept that. Especially if we want to work on ourselves, we want to transform ourselves, we want to become a better person, we need to recognize things about ourselves that are unwise, unskillful, and need to be corrected. So then this person is actually helping us to work on ourselves, to see things in ourselves that we need to work on. On the other hand, if you check what the person is saying, and you can honestly say, no, it's not true. I'm not like that, or I didn't do that, or whatever, then there's no reason to be upset. The person is just saying nonsense. like saying you have, a green horn coming out of your forehead. If somebody said that, you look in the mirror, you don't see any green horn growing out of your forehead. So why get upset about it? It's just nonsense. Okay. So I thought that made so much sense, to just check. Is it true? If it's true, thank you for pointing that out. That's something I need to work on. If it's not true, just ignore it. It's just meaningless noise, nonsense. Okay, so that's a very, very helpful advice for when someone does criticize us or point out something wrong with us. Check to see if it's true or not. Okay, so then, I'll just read what it says here in the text. The vitally important thing is that when we examine ourselves under any circumstances, we should see that we are not deceiving, fooling, or embarrassing ourselves. If we have trained our mind with regard to the most unpleasant worldly phenomena and achieve what we desire, this shows that we have trained our minds. So I think what this means is, he mentions the most unpleasant worldly phenomena, because one of the practices in thought training is learning how to deal with difficulties when problems, difficulties, bad things happen to us, to use these in the path rather than getting upset, angry, depressed, and so on, but actually make this part of our practice, transform this situation into the path. Using Tonglan, thinking about karma, generating compassion, meditating on wisdom. So there's various practices. So if we can look at ourselves and say, when bad things are happening to me, I am able to use these in the path and transform these into the path, then this is a sign that we have well trained our minds. Okay, the next line says, constantly cultivate only a peaceful mind. Although many other translations say joyful mind instead of peaceful mind. So I think it's probably more correct to say joyful mind. So the meaning is, if we are able to put these teachings into practice, the thought training teachings, then no matter what happens, whatever we encounter in our life, even very difficult conditions, pain, sickness, loss, even losing loved ones or losing job, losing possessions and so on, being criticized and so on. So if we can use the thought training teachings with these difficulties and keep our mind positive rather than letting it get caught up in anger, depression, anxiety, and so on. So then this is the meaning of cultivating a joyful mind or a peaceful mind. So we have the tools, in these teachings, there's many, many, many tools that we can use no matter what happens to us, to keep our mind always positive, always peaceful, and even joyful. And it's good to start with small things and get used to doing these practice with small things. For example, the other day I had to go for a blood test. And, it's not pleasant having a needle stuck in your skin. It's relatively small, but it's still an unpleasant thing. So as I was waiting for the nurse to stick the needle into my vein, I was thinking to myself, by this suffering, this little bit of pain that I experience, may I take on the suffering of all sentient beings. And I was just particularly thinking of little children, when they have a jab, when they get stuck with a needle, they cry, they scream. It's just so terrible, so painful for them. So I was thinking, especially for them, I was thinking, may I take on all their suffering so they don't have to have this suffering of being stuck with a needle. So, you know, by having this in the mind, then, you know, your experience is so much less unpleasant. You don't mind it at all. So if we start with little pains, little problems, little difficulties like that, and get used to doing the practice, and then when bigger problems happen, like when you have to go for surgery, for example, you've already practiced this, you've already trained yourself in this kind of practice. And so then you can even use it, you know, in that kind of situation. Whatever suffering I have during this surgery and afterwards during the recovery from the surgery, may all the suffering of sentient beings disappear. May I take on this suffering for all of them. So it makes your mind really, really courageous and strong and positive. And then whatever difficulties you have, you can manage them much better. They become not difficult at all. So yeah, we have to train ourselves, practice gradually, you know, gradually with little problems. And then we might find that these kind of thoughts just pop up in our minds spontaneously without even trying. Okay, then the next line says, the measure of a trained mind is that it has turned away. And so here the commentary, Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun, talks about having an experience of all the stages of the mind training practice arising naturally in one's mind, so that one always feels the wish to use this life, this precious human rebirth that we have, and not waste it. So by that explanation, I think it probably means that turning away, when it says the measure of a trained mind is that it has turned away, probably means your mind has turned away from worldly things, things that are not related to Dharma, not related to the path. So you're just totally focused, totally committed to using your life, which is very, very precious and very rare. So much good we can do with this life. So you're really focused on that and determined to only use it for beneficial things, especially mind training practice. So you've turned away from things that are not related to the Dharma, the path. Another commentary, there's a book called Advice from a Spiritual Friend. And there's a commentary to the 7-point mind training from Geshe Rapton, a wonderful teacher. And in his commentary, he talks at this point about a change or a reversal in our attitude. Instead of being self-centered, one is more altruistic, cherishing others more than oneself. And when this happens automatically, naturally, you're just naturally more concerned for others than for yourself, putting the needs of others first before yourself. So when this has happened, then it's a sign that our mind has become completely accustomed to this inner realization. So I think in his explanation, the turning away, what you're turning away from is self-centeredness. Okay, so this is another measure or a sign of having trained our mind. If we, you know, are moving away from being selfish and moving more into unselfishness and altruism. The next two lines in the text, I didn't find them in other versions of the text. And just to repeat again, there's actually many different versions of this text, the 7-point mind training. So don't be surprised if you read other books and you find different verses, or they're in a different order. Okay, so that's just how it is. So so the next line says, there are 5 great marks of a trained mind. Marks meaning like signs, 5 signs of a trained mind. And so I'll just read these from the commentary, Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun. So these 5 signs are that you become like a certain kind of person, a certain great person with great qualities. The first one is a great hero. You become like a great hero who constantly familiarizes himself or herself with the awakening mind in the knowledge that it is the essence of all the teachings. Okay, so if you become like a great person, a great hero, but hero here shouldn't be thought of like, a hero in battle who goes into battle with a lot of courage and kills many soldiers of the other side. that's a common meaning of hero, but here a hero is more somebody who's very courageous and very strong and very dedicated to cultivating bodhicitta, great compassion, great love, working for the benefit of sentient beings, working for enlightenment, and so on. So somebody who's totally dedicated to that, always working on that, always focused on that. That's the meaning of a great hero. So if you become like that, then this is one of the marks of a trained mind. Second one, he says, is the great disciplinarian, who is careful to avoid even the slightest offense out of his conviction in the law of cause and effect. So great disciplinarian, or another term is a great restraint holder. This is somebody who has a strong conviction in karma, the law of cause and effect, certainty that karma works, karma happens. If we do negative actions, we will suffer. If we do virtuous actions, we will experience happiness and good things. So, so this is again a sign of accomplishment in mind training. If you're very, very certain about karma, and so you're very careful to avoid even small non-virtuous actions, or breaking precepts, if you have precepts, vows. So you're very careful not to break those. And if you do something negative, you quickly purify. So you have a lot of integrity, a lot of commitment to living ethically. So this is another sign of a trained mind. Then the third one is the great ascetic, who can bear hardships in the course of subduing the disturbing emotions in his mind. So an ascetic, in India, there are many practitioners who live very difficult lives, sometimes just living out in the open, not having a roof over their head, and just eating what is offered to them, not accumulating money and possessions and so on, and just totally dedicating themselves to spiritual practice, to meditation. So this great strength and courage and ability to put up with a difficult life like that, and in the commitment to following the path. So here it mentions a great ascetic who can bear hardships in the course of subduing the disturbing emotions in the mind. So that's the main point in Buddhism, is working on our mind, transforming our mind, not letting our mind be under the control of disturbing emotions like anger or attachment, jealousy, pride. So looking out for those, and then dealing with them so that our mind doesn't get caught up in, carried away by them, and then we may even act them out, creating harm for ourselves and others. So someone who's trained their mind well is this kind of person, has that kind of quality of being very determined to work on their mind, transform their mind, and not let their mind be caught up in the disturbing emotions. And the fourth is the great practitioner of virtue, who never separates the activities of his body and speech from the tenfold conduct of the great vehicle. So this means, again, a sign of training the mind is you're very, very strongly committed to doing what is virtuous with your body and your speech. And it mentions here the tenfold conduct of the great vehicle. And I was trying to find an explanation of that. It's also mentioned in there's a prayer, a dedication prayer for the Lam Rim. It's mentioned in the last verse of that. So I couldn't find an explanation, but my guess is that it refers to the 10 perfections. We often talk about the 6 perfections. The Bodhisattva's practice can be summarized into the 6 perfections: generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom. But there's also a list of 10 perfections. And it said that the 6 perfections is a sort of condensation of the 10. So I think that's probably what it means, that a bodhisattva, a great practitioner of virtue, is someone who's always committed to practicing these 10 perfections of the Mahayana. And the last one, the great yogi, who constantly practices the yoga of the awakening mind and its associated teachings. So yogi here, sometimes, the word yoga, probably most people, especially nowadays, when they think of yoga, they think of doing these physical postures, and it's almost like physical exercises or gymnastics in some cases. But the word yoga actually it means uniting your mind. And the real yoga is mental exercises, mental practices, to bring about a more subdued state of mind, a more transformed state of mind. So a real yogi then is someone who is able to manage their mind, control their mind, so it's not just totally caught up in disturbing emotions, but is really focused on spiritual practice. So those are the 5 great marks of a trained mind. And then there's one more line in this section related to the measure of having trained the mind. This says, the trained mind retains control even when distracted. So this means that, when we're in meditation, then it's easier to keep our mind focused. Although even then, it's often difficult to focus the mind. We easily get distracted. But when we're not in meditation, then it's even more difficult to keep our mind focused on our practice and not be disturbed or distracted by other things. But someone who's accomplished in these teachings, these practices, even when some kind of distraction happens, and here it mentions, for example, if you hear unpleasant remarks, accusations, criticism, or mocked, so these kind of words that are thrown at you, which are probably quite painful and unpleasant, and normally people would get angry, maybe upset, maybe even, counterattack the other person. But even in this kind of situation, somebody whose mind is well trained doesn't waver from their practice. They're able to keep their minds focused on their practice, not get upset, not get angry, not lose the heart of mind training, which is compassion for others, love for others, concern for others, more concern for others than oneself, and so on. So the person is still able to keep their mind focused on that and, you know, not lose their control over their mind, even in those kind of difficulties. So it mentions here one thing that one can do is when this kind of unpleasant situation happens, like if we're criticized, then we should understand that it's the result of our own karma, negative actions we've done in the past. And there's a verse here from Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life that says, "Whoever criticizes me or inflicts harm on me or similarly ridicules me, may they be blessed with enlightenment." So a person whose mind is well trained in these teachings would be able to respond in that way. Instead of being angry at someone who criticizes them, they wish them well. They wish them to quickly reach enlightenment. So that's not easy to do, but if we practice, if we make ourselves very, very, very familiar with these practices, then it will happen to us as well, that we'll be able to just think this way, feel this way spontaneously. So these are the signs of having accomplished the practice of mind training, training the mind. So I'd like to go do a little bit more and then stop for questions. But the next, we're up to the 6th point now, which is called the commitments of mind training. And so we'll just do a few of these. There's actually quite a long list. There's about 18, I think. So they're just different pieces of advice about how one should live one's life if one is serious about doing these practices, mind training practices. The first one is always train in the 3 general points. So the 3 general points are one's practice of mind training should, first of all, not be contrary to the teachings. So what that means is, while we're practicing mind training, we shouldn't do anything contrary to the teachings of the Buddha, or if we have taken precepts, or vows, or if we've taken tantric initiations and we have commitments with regard to that. So we shouldn't break any of those. We shouldn't go against any of those. We shouldn't say, well, I'm practicing mind training, so I don't have to do that. I don't have to keep that vow or that pledge. So we should respect all of our precepts, all our pledges, all the things that were taught by the Buddha. And the second of the 3 general points is that our practice should not be led astray. So what this means is that we shouldn't become arrogant and think, I'm a great practitioner of mind training and I can do things that maybe other people can't do, putting oneself in danger. It actually mentions things like, let's say there's like a tree that's said to be possessed by a spirit, like, there's some kind of spirit living in that tree, and so people stay away from it. They don't want to do anything to that tree. But you think, well, I'm practicing mind training, so I can go and cut down that tree and nothing's going to happen to me. Or maybe going to visit somebody who has a very severe disease like COVID-19. and you go and see them without wearing a mask, thinking, well, I'm a practitioner of mind training, so nothing's going to hurt me. And so you go in there and you put yourself into a dangerous situation. Or eating contaminated food, thinking, oh, this isn't going to hurt me because I'm a mind training I'm a practitioner. So we shouldn't have that kind of arrogant attitude and put ourselves in situations where we might actually get hurt, or maybe even other people get hurt. It's possible somebody might do that. That's the meaning of being led astray. And the third general point is that we should be impartial. In our practice, we should be impartial, meaning that when we're practicing mind training, we're cultivating love and compassion and trying to help others and so on. We should do this in an impartial way. We shouldn't favor some people, like friends and family, and help them, do things for them, and then ignore other people who are not our friends and family. Or we may only want to help attractive beings, those who look attractive to us, and then we ignore those who are ugly, or somehow we think of them as lower class and beneath us. So that would be wrong. So our practice of mind training should be totally equanimous. We should have equanimity towards all beings, any sentient being at all, whatever they look like, however they behave, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant. We should include all of them in our practice. The second one is engage vigorously in forceful cultivation and abandonment. And so it says here that when it comes to other sentient beings, we shouldn't use force. We shouldn't try to force people to do things against their will. That's not kind, and they may get angry. But when it comes to our afflictive emotions, taming our mind, overcoming our afflictive emotions, there we should be forceful. Our practice should be forceful and vigorous, because those are the things that are the cause of our suffering, and they prevent our attainment of liberation and enlightenment. So we should use force for them. And also when it comes to cultivating virtue, cultivating positive qualities that help us reach enlightenment, we should also be vigorous and forceful with regard to those. And the third one is subjugate all the reasons for selfishness. So what this means is whenever our attachment or hatred lead us to have prejudice towards certain people, like liking some people, regarding them as friends, disliking others, regarding them as enemies, being indifferent to everybody else, strangers, we should not follow these kind of attitudes. Even though they come up in our mind, we might feel ourselves attracted to some, wanting to help some, and feeling aversion to others, not wanting to help them. But we shouldn't let our mind follow these attitudes. Remembering that relationships are impermanent and they are also uncertain. For example, probably everyone is familiar with the meditation on equanimity, where we think of three people, a friend, enemy, and stranger, and ask ourselves why we feel this way. Why do I like this person and dislike that person and feel nothing for the other person? And then look at how these relationships are not permanent, not fixed. Friends can become enemies, enemies can become friends, strangers can go either way. So there's no use hanging on to these relationships as if they are carved in stone and will last forever and ever and ever. So that's one of the methods for making our mind more level, more balanced towards everybody, rather than this imbalanced attitude of a prejudiced attitude. So we can contemplate that and subjugate the reasons for selfishness, because behind these attitudes is really selfishness. I like this person because they are nice to me. They make me happy. They make me feel good. They do what I want them to do. So our reasons for liking people, if we check carefully, we can trace it to self-centeredness. And then with the people we don't like, we examine, why do I feel that way? We can again trace it to selfishness. They don't do what I like. They do what I don't like. They do what makes me unhappy, what makes me angry, and so on. So we can always find selfishness there in our attitudes, our, our partial attitudes, our biased attitudes towards others. So the more we follow those kind of attitudes and act them out, then we are strengthening self-centeredness. So as a way to overcome self-centeredness, then it's good to work on equanimity, have a more balanced attitude towards others. So I better stop there and just see if there's any questions.
Participants, you can start raising your hand now. We have a question from Faye. Faye, you'd like to unmute yourself?
Hi, Venerable.
Hi.
Good evening to you. I had a question. It's relating to equanimity. So I understand that that we need to think about all sentient beings having been our mothers in past lives, but then wouldn't they, just in general, like wouldn't each person or sentient being have also been our enemy and our friend? So then I get a bit confused. Like they've been our mother, but they've also been our enemy, and it's like,
Yeah.
do I just forget or put aside that they've been our enemy? I don't know. Maybe I'm getting too caught up in this, but
No, this is true. It's a good point. And but we have to remember why we're doing this meditation, why we're contemplating how we've been in every possible relationship for others. Our goal is to cultivate positive feelings, loving kindness and compassion for others. And so that's why we focus on the positive relationships that we've had, especially where they have been kind to us. We have received kindness from them. So that's why they focus on the mother, because our mother does more for us than anybody else in our whole life. So we really contemplate how others have done those things. They've been our mother and they raised us and protected us and fed us and so on. Then it really brings up a feeling of warmth and kindness and wanting to repay their kindness. And I mean, if you focused on how they've been your enemy and they hurt you and killed you, then that's just going to make your mind angry and antagonistic, which is counterproductive. That's not what we're trying to do. And yes, it's true that they have been harmful. They've harmed us, but there's no purpose. There's no benefit to thinking about that.
okay.
And we have been harmful to them too. Okay, so we have also been everybody else's mother, and we have also been everybody else's enemy. So whatever others have done to us, we have also done to them. So, it's better to just let go of those harmful relationships where they hurt us and we hurt them, because that kind of thing happens because of ignorance, because of confusion, because our mind, we don't have control over our mind. Negative thoughts, negative feelings come up, and we just find ourselves carried away by them and doing these negative things. And there's just no benefit to focusing on that and contemplating that. It's better to just put that aside, let go of that, and really focus on what will enable us to cultivate these positive thoughts and positive feelings and get ourselves out of this whole situation of samsara. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get ourselves out of samsara. We're trying to get ourselves to enlightenment. And to do that, what we need to do is cultivate love and compassion, forgiveness, and all these positive qualities. That's
Okay.
like the route out, the way out. And
Okay.
we want to reduce our anger and our hatred. So yeah, it's true what you say, but there's just no benefit in thinking. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I was reading too that if we want to cut attachment towards certain people, we need to also think that they have been, our enemy and whatever in a past life. So I guess what you're saying is like we need to focus on different parts of that fact or parts of that for different purposes, right?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of equanimity is coming to a place where we have equal feelings for everybody rather than this imbalanced, we really care about some people and really want to help some people. And then others, we reject them. We don't want to help them at all. And then others we're just totally indifferent to. So what we're trying to do is cultivate a state of mind where we feel equally concerned for everybody. We see everyone as deserving of our attention and our love and our compassion and our wish to help. So contemplating how we've been in all these different kinds of relationships with every single person, and it doesn't make any sense to hang on to negative feelings towards some, attachment towards others. Try to let go of those feelings. It takes time, and I'm certainly still not at that point myself, but it slowly you can see that your mind does become more balanced, more equanimous. Like they say, a good example of or a good analogy for equanimity is a doctor who has taken on this responsibility to take care of anybody who's sick, anybody who's injured, anybody who needs help. And it wouldn't be right for a doctor to look at all the patients in his or her waiting room and say, okay, I'm going to help that one, but I'm not going to help that one. She's ugly. I don't like her, so I'm not going to help her, right? So anyway, they'd lose their license. They wouldn't be able to practice if they did that. So they have to have equanimity. They have to have this commitment to helping anybody who needs help, anybody who's sick, anybody who's injured. They have to help them.
Okay.
So Bodhisattva's attitude is kind of like that. They're willing to help every single person, whoever needs help.
Okay. So it's not about like loving people we're attached to less. It's just about like loving everyone, making sure we love everyone. Yeah.
Loving everybody equally, caring about everybody equally. Yeah. Having
Okay.
love and compassion for everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a good question. Maybe just one more question, then we'll have to stop. So we have a break before His Holiness's teachings.
You have a question from Sarah. Sarah, you'd like to unmute yourself, please?
Good evening, Venerable. I have a question about the two witnesses, and you mentioned that like acting as if we like somebody when maybe we don't, and we examine our own motivations is not ideal. But I mean, so my question is, before ever being on the path, there were people that I didn't like, people I liked, and people I was indifferent to. And now, trying to separate from this ego self, I know that, when I have a feeling of disliking somebody, that it is, my ego having some kind of reaction. But I still do have that reaction. So what I try to do often is act as if, I don't have those feelings toward that person, and be maybe even kinder. And, I'm trying to act my way into right thinking by doing that. And, you know, when I then examine my motivations for, you know, I feel like, well, you're doing pretty well, because the way you would have been before is, you know, just even, it may be total disregard or even rudeness, or, you know, actually like bad karma generating. So, you know, it's confusing to me. Like, I think it's going to be a while before I get to the point where I can, you know, really practice equanimity. So I do act as if, you know, everyone is my friend or everyone is my mother in situations, but I don't actually believe that yet. So yeah, that's my question about acting as if.
I guess when I said that, I was just throwing that as an example of how we can sometimes behave in a pretentious way. But on the other hand, you know, I'm not advocating that we should just behave in the way that we actually feel, because then we might be rude to people. So I think, yeah, definitely, it's good to be friendly towards someone, even if we may have feelings of dislike for them, because just to be kind and act the way we hope to be one day. But as long as we are aware inside of ourselves of what is really going on in our mind, and aware that we do need to work on our aversion and overcome our aversion and try to have more equanimity for everyone. So, I mean, what you say is completely correct, and I rejoice very much that you are trying to be kind to everybody, acting as if everyone is your friend, not showing your true feelings. But I guess the point is to just try to be genuine, you know, work towards the point where you can have genuine warmth and friendliness towards others. Yeah, and not be deceived by yourself and think, oh, I'm such a wonderful person, you know, but actually knowing that you really do have some unpleasant things. I'll talk more about this next week. I just think we should probably finish here, because
Thank you.
people want to watch His Holiness teachings, need a break. But yeah, it's a very good question. So let's dedicate the Mara, the positive energy from our time together, learning, listening, learning, thinking about, discussing these teachings. So just as we generated in the beginning the wish to benefit all sentient beings, let's dedicate our merit, our positive energy to that goal. By this merit, may all of us and all sentient beings reach enlightenment as quickly as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Venerable.
Next week.
See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.